sing songs at night when I could be going out.
We are here today for my first book video, which is so exciting. I'm not doing ASMR even though it looks like I am. So those are going to be the books I read during the month of May, June and July. I read a lot. It was the span of 3 months, so it makes sense that I would read a lot, but I'm just going to give you my honest thoughts on all the books I read. I read Such a Fun Age by Kylie Red, I think her name is, L'Anomalie by Hervé Letellier, and It Ends With Us by Colin Hoover. Let's begin with Such a Fun Age. I actually got this book because it was in a bundle with Normal People and The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, and that's why I got it. I didn't intend to read it before that, but then I read it because it was the only thing I had. So I wrote, it was a good read with a lot of questions raised, interesting story and plot twist. It was a tad messy sometimes, but overall it was good, and I rated it 7 out of 10. So it was a good book. I'm not gonna say the contrary, but it wasn't insane, it wasn't great, it was an okay book to read like while I was sitting in the train or something, but I didn't love it. Like, next book is L'Anomalie by Hervé Letellier. So this one, okay, I wrote, such an awesome book. I read it in less than a week, and I was in the middle of my finals when I read it, so that means something. It was addicting and kept me reading compulsively. I loved the different characters, the storytelling was brilliant, the plot was so insane, and they kept talking about math. Wow. I absolutely adored this book. I do not know if it exists in English, but I think it does, because I'm pretty sure it's really famous. It was such a good book. Everything was just, in the beginning I was a bit lost because there were a lot of characters and each chapter you had a new character, and at the beginning I was like, what is happening? And it's even like only in about maybe you've already read about half of the book when the actual plot comes in, but you're already like into the book and the characters. So that's maybe my favorite book I've read this year so far. And I did read The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, which I absolutely loved, so that means a lot. But it was a great book. I rated it 9.5 out of 10. Honestly, very close to perfection. I loved it so much. I absolutely recommend it. Next, I read, because it was very popular on the internet, I read It Ends With Us by Colin Hoover. So I wrote, a good read. At first, I thought it would be too cheesy because it starts out. A good read. At first, I thought it would be too cheesy because it starts as just a romance, but then the narrative shifts, and suddenly I was much more into it. A great book about marital violences and homelessness. Little. I don't think it deserves this much hype, though. I can understand that it's a good book, like Such a Fun Age, like it's a good read. When you're bored, you grab your book and that's great, but it's not a book that I'm gonna be like, wow, this was such a great book, my favorite book of 2024. I don't really understand all the hype it gets, because I feel like it's a very ordinary book. It doesn't have any like insane plot twists, or the narrative is interesting. The story of Lily and Ryle is really interesting to follow, but no, I liked it. It wasn't great, but it was good. So that was May. I didn't read so much in May because, as I mentioned, I was studying for my finals. I was quite busy. Then we are going to go into June. So the books of May and June I do not have with me. I just have those. These are the books of July, but I'll try to put pictures each time. So the first book I read in June, I finished It Ends With Us because I hadn't really finished it in May, so I finished it in June. I also began reading Harry Potter 4 in German. So I've been reading it for 3 months now because I began in May and I'm still reading it now. I also read La Métamorphose by Kafka. So I think it's called The Metamorphosis in English. That's the philosophy book by Kafka. I was recommended it by a friend. So I read it and it was really short, so it didn't take me so much time to read it, but I didn't really like it that much. There was so much violence. Like the way the relatives of Gregor, who is the hero in the story, and he transforms into a bug, like a gigantic bug, and his family members started treating him like he's a nuisance and a monster, and I don't know, like it's like they don't even know that it's Gregor, their son or brother. So yeah, I don't see the philosophic message that is behind it, but I'm sure it's very interesting if you care about philosophy. But it wasn't incredible, and yeah. I don't really like that book. Then I also finished a book I had started in July. Let me see, because I have a little recap on here. Yeah, I began a book called Les Illusionistes. It's by Nora Roberts. I read it in French because my cousin lended it to me, but I think Nora Roberts writes in English, so it has to exist in English. I bought the title here, and this was really good. This was a great book. I really liked it. The characters were so interesting. There were some scenes that were really interesting, mature scenes, which I really liked, and I love the ending, and I love that you follow the characters for the whole of their lives, and you can see them like be children, and then you see them being like losing their father and such, and there were so many schemes and plans that went kind of well or that absolutely failed. It was a great book. I really liked it. I didn't write out a rating, but I think I would rate it 8.5 out of 10 because it was really good. It was good read, that's for sure, and it was quite thick too. So yeah, I like that. And then I began. So this one I happen to have with me. I began the science book by Stephen Hawking. It's a physics book rather than just a science book. Une brève histoire du temps, du Big Bang au trou noir. So that is about black holes and Big Bang and everything like quantum mechanics, relativity, photons, mesons, like particles in general. And I actually read this when I was 16, and I loved it. But this time, because I had studied actually many of the notions in university, I really saw it under a new light, and it was even better. So yeah, I love this book. I'm gonna rate it 10 out of 10. Fuck it. 10 out of 10. It's a 10. So that was it for the month of June. Harry Potter in German, Stephen Hawking's book, The Metamorphosis, and Lizzie Illusionist. That's it. And next, in July, so in July I do have the books. I think I finished the Stephen Hawking book in the beginning of July, but I had like 3 pages left to read, I think, so it wasn't that much. Oh, those other ones. So, the first book I read was Pride and Prejudice, which is a huge classic, right? And I didn't know if I was going to like it or not. And in the beginning, I felt like I didn't like it, but I ended up changing my mind. Where's my? Oh, it's here. I also saw the movie right before I finished the book, and the movie really made me want to go through and actually finish the book, because I knew that I like the ending. And so let's see what I wrote. A great classic indeed, the enemy to lovers book. In the beginning it was a bit hard to read and I wasn't getting into it, but once I knew all the characters and was used to the writing that's very aged and really hard to understand for someone whose native language is not English, I could barely put it down. The movie wasn't so great on the relationship between Darcy and Elizabeth, but the book really was. I really felt Liz's change of heart all throughout. Good read, length is just right. So yeah, I really thought I wouldn't like it, because in the beginning it was really hard to get into, but the more I wasn't getting into it, the more I liked the characters, the more I realized that it wasn't all black and white, and that people that you thought were unkind were actually very kind and such, just like Darcy. And it was really interesting. And the plot twist of like someone marrying someone when you're not expecting it. It was a great book. I can totally understand why it's a classic, and I rated it 8.5 out of 10. So a good book. The next book I read was It Starts With Us by Colleen Hoover. I actually liked this one better than I liked the first one, because I think that's because I already knew the characters, and so I could, instead of having to like understand who the characters are and building their personas and such, I could just read and understand and just enjoy the romance. And I think I needed a bit of more romance, maybe because it's the summer, I don't know. But okay, let's see what I wrote. I think I like this one more than It Ends With Us, because I already knew everyone's backstory and could just enjoy the plot twists like Josh. In case you know, you know. I like that we get to see more of Atlas and Emerson too. I also love how supportive Marshall and Alyssa are with Ryle's actions. The divorce is really hard and everybody sees it, but everybody is so supportive of Lily, it's amazing. I kind of wish we got to see more of Lily's business, but that's really just a small thing. Overall, a great read, good sequel to a less good book. I think, yeah, I really like this one better. Because I think maybe because I love Atlas, I love his character, I love that he was homeless and he went through so many things, but even though he pushed through and made a restaurant and all that. So yeah, I quite recommend it, but obviously I can't tell you read this one without reading the one before, because you would be lost. So, but I think it's really worth reading. Even if It Ends With Us, it's worth reading. Like, it's good to read. It's just not insanely good like everyone seems to say it is. Then next, also in July, I read 5 Feet Apart. The book is beautiful. I love beautiful books. I love it. So 5 Feet Apart, I think I read it quite fast. I read it in like 2 or 3 days maximum, I think. And so it was really easy to read, that's for sure. And I got into the story very fast. So I wrote, a beautifully written book with touching characters and impossible love story and terminal illnesses, everything you need to build a good novel. The book was easy to get into. I read 100 pages in one day, and once something happened, I'm not going to spoil you, but something major happened, and I just couldn't stop crying, and I just couldn't put the book down. Like, there was one evening where I was on my bed crying for like 2 hours. It was really emotional, but I loved it. I was afraid the romance would be too cheesy for me, and at some point it felt that way, but for like 3 pages, and then it felt more serious again. They really didn't get into the romance all that much, or it was always with some side of, oh, but we can't be together. So yeah, I can't wait to see the movie. I'm really excited to see how they portrayed, especially like Abby, the sister, and yeah, just what the actors look like and how they look like, because when you read a book you imagine a whole word in your head, and then you see the movie and you're like, oh wait, that wasn't the word in my head. Anyways, and then the last one is Yellowface. Yellowface was actually, I can't say, no, I think Pride and Prejudice was my favorite this month. Oh, and did I say how much I read it? I rated 5 Feet Apart, 8 out of 10. It was a good read, and it was a really good summer read, I think so too. So Yellowface, a great book without a doubt. Several plot twists, even made me believe for a second that ghosts are real. An interesting plot and interesting characters. I loved Juniper, and the relationship she had with Athena was very interesting. My only regret is that the author doesn't say at all how much is fiction and how much actually happened to her. The whole book, I was like, is this real? Like, is this inspired by her life somehow? And she never says anything on it. So, I don't know. It also talked of racism a lot and issues such as ownership, jealousy, the book word. I liked it, but didn't love it. It was a good book, but I didn't love it. It was a good read, but not much further than that. Maybe it's made for aspiring authors, on people who really are into book world. I feel like it's one of those books where I'm gonna read it and forget about it, you know, like, yeah, it was a good read. I was glad to read it while I was reading it, but I won't be saying, wow, that was the best book I ever read, or thinking about like, oh, I remember this character. No, probably not. But it was a good book. Okay, so this is the end of this video. If I had to recommend one book, let's see, I'm gonna recommend 2 books to you. So read, if you like, Pride and Prejudice. I really liked it. I really, really liked it. But do watch the movie along with that. It helps, I think. And also L'Anomalie by Hervé Letellier, if it happens to be translated into English, which I hope it is. But otherwise, maybe with Yellowface, it was a really interesting one, yeah. And yeah, that's the end of this. Thank you so much for watching my first book video. I hope you had fun, and I hope you know what you will be reading. Bye.
Oh, am I missing out? No, getting my heart broken by a boy. Oh, am I missing out on all this joy?